One of the most essential skills to master in InDesign is working with paragraphs. InDesign is built to make your text look incredible, and paragraphs are where the real magic happens to bring your content to life, to guide your readers through your design. In this video, we're diving into the powerful tools InDesign offers for managing and formatting paragraphs. We will be exploring everything from alignment and spacing to advanced text styles to give your layout a professional edge. We're about to dive into a collection of tips that will take your design skills to the next level. So get comfortable and let's jump into InDesign and check out paragraphs. So here I have a few document examples showcasing some of the dynamic ways you can format paragraphs. Here is a magazine spread where paragraphs can be a bit more creative with flair with font pairings. And here is an example of a text-heavy document where the type needs to be more practical and systematic. At this point, it will help to be aware of all the ways you can use your type for any design approach. In a previous video, we looked at how to work and format type. Moving on to paragraph text, this becomes a little bit more complex, where instead of working with individual pieces of type, we now start to work with larger chunks of type. So let's get hands-on and look at how we can manage and format paragraphs. And to do this, let's jump into this worksheet. This document can be found in the downloadable folder that comes with this course. This download folder comes with multiple projects and a ton of assets and resources we will be using in this course. You can find the link to acquire the folder from the description. With the download folder open, click into folder 2, practice files, and open the practice worksheets InDesign file. If we scroll down to page 2, we can see a variety of worksheets. For this video, we are going to look at the paragraphs worksheet. So with the selection tool, I'll select the working with paragraphs thumbnail. Now I'll either come to the links panel and click edit original, or I'll hold Alt on the keyboard and double click on the worksheet thumbnail, and the worksheet will open in its own document. In this practice session, you learn all the crucial ways you can format paragraphs in InDesign, giving you the insight and skills to build professional and visually appealing compositions. Here in this worksheet, you can see what we are going to cover. We're going to start simple for those of you who may be new to InDesign, and we are going to go all the way up to some of the more advanced features. So let's scroll down to the second spread, and here we can see a number of paragraph features. At a glance here, you can see a lot of formats that can be applied to paragraphs, and these are the following things we are going to look at in this video. So let's now come to the second spread and have a go and see all the ways we can work with type in InDesign. So when working with paragraphs in InDesign, there are two key panels you want to pay close attention to, the paragraph panel and the control panel. If you cannot see these panels, you can come up to Window and click on Control, or into Type and click on Paragraph. Now they both do the same, however your control panel can be set to the top where you can see other formatting features. I like to keep my control panel at the top of my screen and my paragraph panel in the bottom right. So to begin, we are going to start off with a simple text frame. So to create a text frame, you can do one of two things. You can come over to the Tools panel and select one of the frames or shape tools. In this instance, I'll select the rectangle tool and I'll click to draw out a frame. Now with a frame in your work area, you can simply click the Type tool, then click on the empty frame, and that will then become a type frame with the type prompt ready to enter in your type. So I'll just delete that. Another way is to come to the Tools menu and this time click on the Type tool, back into the canvas area, click and drag to draw out a frame, and upon release, that will then become a type frame with the type prompt ready to enter in your type. So once you have a text frame, next you're going to want to work with some type. Now you can either start typing to add text into the frame, or you can copy and paste some text that you might have from another source and paste into the frame. Or if you don't have any text, but you just want to start working with some type, you can simply add some placeholder type. To do this is simple. With the text prompt in the frame ready to go, simply right click and select Fill with Placeholder Text, and upon click, the frame will be filled with Lorem Ipsum. Now a key thing to keep in mind here right at the start is hyphenation. Now hyphenation refers to the automatic breaking of words at the end of a line to improve text flow and create more balanced paragraphs. When a word is too long to fit at the end of a line, InDesign can insert a hyphen and move part of the word to the next line, as we can see here. Now you may or may not want this. Personally, I don't like to use hyphenation in my paragraphs, so to turn this off is pretty straightforward. To do this, we can either come down to the paragraph panel where we can see hyphenate with a tick in the box. To turn it off, we can click this, or we can come up to the control panel on the far left. We can click down on the paragraph icon, and towards the middle here, we can see again hyphenate with the tick. If I click this off, we can turn off hyphenation. So if I click this on and off, we can see in the text frame where hyphenation is activated and deactivated. Now, when we use the automatic fill feature, this can be pretty random. For the sake of this tutorial, I'm going to want to get 2 clean paragraphs. So what I'm going to do here is click into my block of paragraph text and remove any random line breaks to get a solid block of text. Then, about halfway through my paragraph, I'm just going to add a period and press enter once to add a hard return. My aim here is to have a block of text with just 1 clean line break in the middle, like so. So first, I'll click into the type frame and select all the type. Up in the control panel, I'll click on the top drop down to browse the fonts I have installed, or I'll just type in Arial into the box to show the list of fonts available, and I'll select Arial Regular and change the font to size 10. With it selected, I can also change the color. So over in the swatches, I'll just apply a blue color. Now, once you have a block of type selected in your frame, if you want to quickly deselect it, we can press Escape on the keyboard, and then we will jump into the selection tool and the frame will be selected. So with the paragraph of text selected, we can come up to the control panel and click a series of alignment options. First, we will look at the horizontal alignment tools. Here we can click to align center. I can click to align to the right or back again to the left. And that's how easy it is to align your paragraph text inside a frame horizontally. So I'll press Escape to deselect the frame. And with the text frame selected, back up in the control panel, we can see some further align tools. This time, we will look at the vertical align tools. Here we can click to align center in the frame vertically, and we can click to align to the bottom of the frame. So top, middle, and bottom. For now, I'll click to align to the middle of the frame. So that is how to create a simple type frame and add and format some paragraph text. Once you have set up a frame with some paragraph text, duplicating is really easy. With the selection tool, we can click on the text frame, click and drag down while holding Alt on the keyboard, and upon release, that will duplicate the type frame. To enter back into the type frame with the selection tool, we can double click, and that will place us into the frame where we can place the cursor and select all or parts of the type. Now, another common feature is justifying type. So I'll select all the type in the frame, come up to the control panel and click a series of options to justify the type. Here I can click to justify to the left, I can click to justify to the center, or click to justify all lines. To override this, I can click back on the Align Left type button, and that will remove the justification feature. And I'll press Escape to deselect. Now, another common feature is the drop cap. Now, drop caps are often used at the beginning of chapters, articles, or sections to create stylish, attention-grabbing introductions. To apply a drop cap, simply click into the paragraph of text you wish the drop cap to be applied to. Then down in the paragraph panel, we can set a value of the drop cap setting. Here I'll set this to 3, and the drop cap will span 3 lines. Easy. So I'll press Escape to deselect the text, and with the selection tool active, we can click on the text frame, click and drag down while holding Alt on the keyboard, and upon release, that will duplicate another type frame. To enter back into a type frame, with the selection tool, we can double click, and that will place us into the frame where we can place the cursor and select all or parts of the type. For now, I'll click into the top paragraph and set the drop cap back to 0. So the next feature we're going to look at here is paragraph spacing. Now, a common mistake that beginners can make in InDesign is to use the Enter button to add a hard return to attempt to create space between paragraphs. For example, if I come into my text frame, place my mouse cursor at the end of the first paragraph, if I press Enter, I can add a hard return to force the line break to create a paragraph space in between. Now, when working with paragraphs in InDesign, this should be avoided. The best way to create space between your paragraphs is to use paragraph spacing, and to do this is simple. So I'll just come back into my paragraph text and press the delete button to remove that forced paragraph space. And with all my text selected, I'll come down into the paragraph panel, and if we look carefully, we will see an option called paragraph spacing. And I'll push this up to 3 mils, and now we will see the space applied to the paragraph text. So I'll press Escape to deselect the paragraph, and come to the bottom of my bounding box, and I'm going to click the middle anchor point, and I'm just going to drag down to extend the size. What I want to do here is add more type into the frame. So I'll click my mouse cursor at the end of the paragraph text, right click and select Fill with Placeholder Text, and this will fill the frame with more text. Now, if the automatic text is filled and includes paragraphs, you will see the spacing has been applied. However, what I'll do here is just click back into my text and remove some of the paragraph lines to create 3 paragraphs of type like so. So this brings us to another important feature to keep in mind, and this is hidden characters. Hidden characters in InDesign are non-printable symbols that represent formatting elements in your text. such as spaces, paragraph breaks, tabs, and line breaks. These characters are essential for understanding the structure and flow of your text, but are invisible by default when working in a document. So I'll press Escape to deselect the paragraph, then I'll press W to enter into normal mode, and here we can see all the bounding boxes and the columns in the background. If I come up to type, scroll down and hit show hidden characters, in normal mode, you will be able to see at the end of your paragraphs these special icons representing paragraph breaks. If I put my mouse cursor again here and press enter to add a hard return, we will see another paragraph break. As I said earlier, you want to avoid creating space between your paragraphs with hard returns. Viewing hidden characters helps you identify and troubleshoot formatting issues, especially when working with complex layouts, ensuring that your text flows correctly. These characters won't appear in your final output, but are invaluable for design precision. So I'll just press delete to remove that forced paragraph break space. And this brings us to an important aspect to keep in mind in InDesign, and that is the difference between a hard return and a soft return. A hard return inserts a visible line break, and a soft return inserts a line break without starting a new paragraph. In most word processors, a hard return is created by pressing enter on your keyboard, and a soft return is created by pressing shift plus enter on your keyboard. For example, if I come into one of the paragraphs and press enter to add a hard return, we will see the paragraph break icon and the space between the type. Now, if I press delete to go back up and remove that, this time I'll press shift plus enter to add a soft return. As I do this, you will notice the text will create a line break without the space. And in this instance, we will also notice a different character icon at the end. Hard returns are used to create new paragraphs, and soft returns are used to add line breaks, which can be useful to tweak the text ragging and how text is composed within the frame. Working with hard breaks and soft breaks is something you will be doing a lot as you work with paragraph type in InDesign. So at this early stage, it will be good to be aware of it, so keep this in mind. So another feature to be aware of is Overset type. With the selection tool active, if I click on the bottom middle anchor point of the frame bounding box and drag up, in the bottom right of the bounding box, you will see a little red square. This red square represents Overset type, which basically means that the type frame is not big enough to show all the content inside the frame. This is something you are going to want to keep an eye on when working with type frames and paragraphs. A quick tip here, if you ever see a type frame with this icon inside that represents Overset, with the selection tool, if you double click on the bottom middle bounding box anchor, the frame will snap to the content inside. So another feature to be aware of is auto sizing. Up to this point, we have created very basic type frames where we can add the type and adjust the text frame manually. Having a standard text frame like this, it is very common to incur overset type as more text is added. Now there is one feature which you can use to automatically set the frame to the contents inside. So again, I'll come to the frame and just move up where we can see the overset type. This time I'll right click and come to text frame options. Upon click, a menu will appear. Over on the left, we will see an option called auto size. If I click this, we can see a drop down with a range of auto sizing options. In this case, I'll hit the preview button, I'll click to select height only, and below I'll click the option to align from the top. Notice now that the frame will expand to fill the contents, and I'll click OK. Now if I click the bottom middle anchor point and attempt to drag it up or down, upon release it will snap the frame to the text. So I'll double click into the type frame, place the cursor at the end of the last paragraph, right click and click on Fill with Placeholder Type. Upon click, you will see a lot of type has just been added. What I can do here is come in and remove some of the text, and as I do this, you will see the frame will snap to respond to the contents inside. And I'll just remove some of the text to come back to our 3 paragraphs like so. Another feature to be aware of is inset spacing. So right now, if we look closely, the text is right up against the left and the top of the frame. Now there may be instances where you want to create a buffer or margin around the text inside the frame. To do this is quite simple. If you have your mouse cursor in your frame, be sure to press Escape to deselect the frame and activate the selection tool. With the frame selected, again right click and come to text frame options. In general, we will see halfway down an option called Inset Spacing. So with the preview square checked, we can click to add some top, left, bottom or right spacing. If the lock icon is activated in the middle, then if you apply a unit to the top left, the same will be applied to the rest. And if you unlock the icon, you can set custom values for the top, left, right or bottom. In this instance, I'll just keep the lock icon set and add a 5mm to the top, which will apply a 5mm to the rest. I'll click OK, and now I have created some space around my text. Now we just looked at how to create space around the type, but there is another feature to add space called indentation, which is slightly different. For example, if I come and double click into my type frame and place my mouse cursor into the second paragraph, if I come down into the paragraph panel, here we will be able to add some indent to the left. In this instance, I'll add 5, and we can also add 5 to the right. So indentation is useful to apply to specific paragraphs of text. For example, if I place my mouse cursor into the first paragraph of text, back down in the paragraph panel, this time I'll add a value to the first line left indent, and I'll set this to 5. So here, I have not only added space around the type, but also added indentation to specific paragraphs. Next, I'll click into the text, select all, and set the font size to 8 up in the control panel. Now, there may be instances where you want to increase the space between the words in your paragraph. Doing this is really simple by adjusting the value for tracking. So I'll press Escape to deselect the paragraph frame to activate the selection tool. With the frame selected, I can come down into the character panel and simply click to add the value for tracking. And in this instance, I'll set this to 50. Now, as well as increasing the space between the letters, you may also wish to increase the space between the lines. This can be done by adjusting the paragraph leading. With the frame selected, again we can come down into the character panel and simply click to add a value for leading. In this instance, I'll set this to 15. Notice, as we adjust the leading, the text frame will also adjust because we have the auto size applied. Now, a useful feature to keep in mind if you're looking to balance your leading, simply click the drop down and click auto. If I do this, InDesign will apply the default leading to the text to balance it. So up till now, we have been looking at one simple text frame and how we can format paragraph type within it. When working in InDesign, compositions can be a lot more complicated. It's common to work with multiple type frames in one document, where type will run across many type frames. This is called type threading. So if you come back to the first spread in the worksheet, and I'll press W to toggle into normal mode, here we can see two boxes. If I click on the first box and look closely between these two boxes, we can see a blue line connecting them both together. If I click on the second box and move this around, we will see the line remain. Now, if you cannot see this line, you can come up to View, come down to Extras and show Text Threads. So this line basically indicates that these boxes are connected and that the type will thread from the first box through to the second. If I drag my text frame down, we will see the text disappear from the second frame. This is because the first frame is now large enough to contain all the text. If I then reduce the size of the frame again, we will see the text continue on into the next frame to fill it. Keep in mind, this is something that is very common in InDesign, and you will need to get to grips with this one as you will be doing it quite often in your layouts. So let's have a go at this. So be sure to deselect the type frame by pressing Escape. With the selection tool, this time click and drag on our first text frame while holding Alt and release at the bottom of the worksheet. And before I start working with this text frame, I'll make sure that up in the control panel, the text is aligned to the top in the frame. I'll press W to enter into normal mode, and with the selection tool, I'll adjust the bounding box to scale the frame to fit within one column, like so. I'll double click into the frame box, select all and set the font to 8. I'll place my mouse cursor at the end of the paragraph text, right click and select Fill with Placeholder Text to add more text to my frame. So this is a common scenario you may find yourself in InDesign, where you have a typed frame full of text and you may want to divide it across another text frame. So the next step you want to take is to create a new frame in which to thread the text across. Now this can be done one of two ways. When you have a frame selected, if you look carefully at the bottom right, you will see a little square box. If we click on this, we will see the mouse cursor change. If I now simply click and drag to draw a new frame next to the first one, upon release, we will see a line connect from the first frame to the next. Now with the selection tool, if we grab our first frame and click and drag up to reduce the size, we will now see the type continue through into the next frame. So I'll quickly press undo a few times to go back and remove the second frame. Another way is to come over to the tools menu into the frame tool, click the rectangle frame tool, come and just click and drag another frame. With the new frame created, I'll click back onto my first frame with the selection tool, click back onto the little box in the bottom right corner. Now this time, instead of clicking and dragging a new frame, we can simply click on our new empty frame and you will see the line connect from the first frame to the next. So you can either click the square and draw a new frame or draw a separate frame and connect them. Easy. Okay, so what I'm going to do next is click on the first frame, drag down a little. I'll place my mouse cursor at the end of the paragraph text. I'll right click and select Fill Placeholder with Text and add more text to my frame. And now we have two frames full of type. Then I'll click and drag my first frame down even more And now we have a situation where we have two frames where there appears to be more text in one frame than the other. Now this is also another common situation that can occur in InDesign. And one solution to balance two columns can be to simply click on the left column, click and drag it up or down to try and force the text from one column to the next. Now this is one technique that can be done, but it can be a little fiddly. So there is one feature you can use to make this process a little easier. So what I do here is come into my paragraph text, click and place my mouse cursor at the start of this paragraph. I can come up to type, down to insert break character and click column break. Upon click, every bit of text after that will now be forced across into the next frame. Now, no matter how much I click and drag the bottom of the first frame up and down, the text will still start in the next column after that column break. And if we press W and zoom right in here, we'll see a special hidden character pointing down, which represents the column break. So that is one of the simplest ways to manage text across columns. Now, the only drawback to this is that it can be very manual and it would require a lot of focus to keep on top of. So if we come back to the first spread in the worksheet, here we can see a single text frame with two columns inside. Now, there is another feature you can consider to make working with columns a lot easier. So now I'm going to come back down into our worksheet, click on the second column and simply press delete to remove it. Then I'll click and drag the frame right to expand the frame like so. I'll double click into the text, place my mouse cursor at the end of the paragraph and press backspace to remove the column break to bring the text back up. So with the text frame selected, we can right click, come to text frame options, and in general, we will see the options for columns. Currently this is set to 1, but if I push this up to 2, we will see 2 columns are now applied in our single text frame. And below this, we can toggle the gutter space, and if we push this up and down, we can adjust that space accordingly. For now, I'll click OK. Now we can also toggle this up in the control panel. Towards the middle, we can see this option here for columns. Currently this is set to 2, but if I push this up to 3, we will see 3 columns now applied in our single text frame. And I'll put this back to 2. So if I pull the type frame down, we can see that some columns are now longer than others. Now we could try and grab the bottom of the text frame and drag up to try and force the balance in, but there's actually a much easier way of doing this. If we look back up in the control panel, to the right of the column number, there is a little button here called Balance Columns. If we click this, InDesign will do its best to balance the columns. And if we click the button below this to unbalance the columns, this will turn it off. For now, I'll click back on the column balancing button. This can also be done by right-clicking on a frame, going back into text frame options, and clicking the balance column box under columns. So while we're on the topic of applying columns to single text frames, this brings us to another really important feature when working with paragraphs. Another common thing for beginners in InDesign is to create separate text frames to control the spacing between headers and paragraphs. Looking back at the first spread, on the right here, in the first example, beginners can often create separate text frames in order to tweak the space manually. However, there is a way to manage headers and columns in a much simpler way in one frame like this one below. Here we can see a single text frame containing one header, one paragraph and 2 paragraphs going across 2 columns all in one frame. And if we click and drag this text frame, it all works beautifully together, as opposed to the first frame above that would otherwise need to be managed separately. So now I'm going to come back down into our worksheet, click on the text frame and press Alt and click and drag into the next page to duplicate. So with the selection tool, if we click on the frame, we can see up in the control panel that this text frame is set to 3 columns. Next, I'll click down to set across 2 columns. So I'll click into the first paragraph. Now back up in the control panel next to columns, we can see this option here which is called span columns. Right now this is set to none. If I click to drop down and set this to 2, upon click, that first paragraph will now span across 2 columns, and below 2 columns will remain. So I'll place my mouse cursor at the very start of the text. I'll press enter once to add a hard return to create a new paragraph break. I'll press the up arrow to go back to the top and simply type in title goes here. I'll select this, change the font to bold and set the font to 20. I'll select the paragraph below and set the font to 14, and now we have a single frame with our title, sub-paragraph and our columns below. The only thing left to do is now adjust the spacing between the columns. And this can be done quite simply using paragraph spacing. So I'll click to place my mouse cursor into the title, and down in the paragraph panel, I'll click the drop down and set this to 8. Then I'll click to place my mouse cursor into the sub-paragraph below, and down in the paragraph panel, I'll set this to 8 mils, and we will set the space equal to the title above. And if this pushes my text where I get a little red box on my frame, I'll simply press escape to deselect the type, and double click on the bottom middle anchor to expand the frame to fit the contents. So that's how easy and straightforward it can be to manage titles, subparagraphs and columns of text within one frame. And it doesn't necessarily have to stop there. We can add further modifications to the text. For example, if we click into the text frame and select in the first paragraph, we can add an indent to the left down in the paragraph panel to control the width of the first paragraph. Next, we can select the bottom two columns, into the paragraph panel, add a right indent of 5, press escape, right click, select text frame options, set right indent spacing to 10 mils, reduce the gutter space, and that is how you can easily toggle your column spacing within one frame. Next, we're going to look at how to set paragraph type diagonally. Now, it's not very common for one to do diagonal type in InDesign, but in the unique instance where you'd like to try and use it, there is an easy way to do it in InDesign. So I'll come back into our worksheet, click on the text frame we created earlier with 3 columns, press Alt and click and drag into the next page to duplicate. Up in the control panel, I'll set the column to 2, and with my text frame, I'll come over to the tools menu, click and hold on the scale tool, and we will see a tool called share. The share tool allows you to slant or skew an object, such as text, images, or shapes, along a specific axis. This tool can be used to create a distorted or angled effect, giving your design a dynamic 3-dimensional look. This tool will allow you to manipulate the type frame to add an angle to it. Now, when using this tool, you will also need to pay close attention to the reference point on the far left of the control panel. Here you can see some squares, and this basically represents the reference point for the frame. In this instance, I'm going to click the middle square, and with the share tool selected, I'll come over to my type frame, press and hold Shift on the right side. I'll just click and drag up like so. As I do this, we will add a new diagonal dimension to the frame, and as you can see, the type is now at a slight angle inside the type frame. Now, one of the cool things about this is if we put our mouse on the left or right middle anchor point, we can click and drag, and we can see that the type frame will extend at the same angle. So next, we're going to look at how you can align your text to a baseline grid. In Adobe InDesign, aligning paragraphs to a baseline grid is a technique used to create consistent line spacing across a multi-column or multi-page layout. The baseline grid acts as an invisible guide, ensuring that all lines of text align horizontally across the page, regardless of different text boxes or columns. Designers often align to the baseline grid in professional layouts such as magazines, books, and reports to create a uniform and visually structured layout that feels balanced and organized. So I'll come to the first page, and with the selection tool, I'll click on my text frame with the paragraphs in one column, and while holding Shift, I'll click and drag over my second spread. I'll press W to enter into normal mode, and on the keyboard, I'll press Command plus Alt plus colon on Mac or Control plus Alt plus colon on PC, and this will toggle on the baseline grid. So if I come up to InDesign, Preferences, and down to Grid, right now I have the baseline grid set to 10 points. With the text frames selected, if we come into the paragraph panel, we can see in the bottom right there are 2 buttons. On the far right there's a button, and if I click this, it'll align the text to the baseline grid. So regardless of what leading is set in the control panel or character panel, if you have this button turned on, it will align to the baseline grid. And if you want to turn this off, simply click the button to the left. So the last thing we're going to look at is how to highlight text. If we look back up at the first spread, we can see that in this example, we have a paragraph of text which appears to be highlighted in the background. Now, this is a neat trick that you might want to do to add some additional formatting. And to do this is quite simple. So down in my worksheet, let's draw out a small text frame. Right click and fill with some placeholder text. I'll change the font to Arial, set the font to 9. I'll select all and make sure to turn off hyphenation. Then up in the control panel, I'll come and click to underline my text. Down in the character panel, I'll click on the top right menu and click on Underline Options. Here I can push the weight up, change the offset settings, change the color and tint, click OK, push up the leading, and that's an easy way to add some formatting to your paragraphs to add some highlights. So that is all the key insights you need to know about formatting and working with paragraphs in InDesign to get you started. Working with paragraphs is one of the most important things you can master in InDesign in order to create professional layouts with ease. So now we are all clued up on how to use paragraphs. It's now time to move on to the next subject. So see you in the next video.